In the late 1950s, in a humble studio in Liverpool's Kensington, a group of young musicians, who would later be known as the Beatles, embarked on a journey that would forever alter the landscape of music. Join me for the story of In Spite of All the Danger, a song that encapsulates the spirit of a band on the brink of greatness. The specific year was 1958, and John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison, along with their band, known as the Quarrymen back then, sought to make their mark. So they pulled together their resources, and each one contributed £1 to record their first disc at Percy Phillips' studio, a modest setup with a single microphone in a room barely larger than the doctor's waiting area. On the 12th of July 1958, the group carried their instruments on a bus and arrived at Kensington, where Percy Phillips had set up his recording service in the living room of his Victorian terraced house. With no time for frills or multiple takes, they recorded In Spite of All the Danger and a version of Buddy Holly's That'll Be the Day on a 78 RPM shellac disc. In Spite of All the Danger stands out as the Quarrymen's sole original song at the time. The song, which was sung by John Lennon, showed the group's ability and their shared musical vision. McCartney recalls that the song was inspired by Elvis Presley, but he declines to state which song it actually was. The recording of the song also featured a pianist named John Duff Lowe, whose precise playing was directed by McCartney, hinting at the meticulous arrangements that would later become a hallmark of the Beatles' music. Fast forward to today, and In Spite of All the Danger is not just a piece of music history, it's a narrative of dreams, ambition, and the unyielding power of music. It's a reminder of a time when songs were thought to belong to everyone, floating freely in the air, waiting to be captured by those daring enough to reach out for them. As for the unique writing credits on the song, well, McCartney had this to say about that, quote, "It says on the label that it was me and George, but I think it was actually written by me and George played the guitar solo. We were mates and nobody was into copyrights and publishing. Nobody understood. We actually used to think that when we came down to London that songs belonged to everyone. I've said this a few times, but it's true. We really thought they were just in the air and that you couldn't actually own one, so you can imagine the publishers saw us coming. Welcome, boys, sit down. That's what you think, is it?" So that's what we used to do in those days. Because George did the solo, we figured that he wrote the solo. It was my song. It's very similar to an Elvis song. It's me doing an Elvis, but I'm a bit loath to say which. I know which one. It was one that I'd heard at scout camp when I was younger, and I'd loved it. And when I came to write the first couple of songs at the age of about 14, that was one of them." End quote. The recording session didn't last very long, and in fact probably only took about an hour to record all of the songs according to some accounts. The three Beatles each took turns sharing the record because they couldn't afford to buy more than one. Paul had this to say about that, quote, "When we got the record, the agreement was that we would have it for a week each. John had it a week and passed it on to me. I had it for a week and passed it on to George, who had it for a week. Then Colin had it for a week and passed it to Duff Lowe, who kept it for 23 years. End quote. Eventually, McCartney bought the original shellac disc back from Lowe and made many copies of it. And luckily for fans of the Beatles, the song was released in 1995 along with That'll Be the Day on Anthology 1.